I'm Ellis Martin. Join me right here, right now, on Money Talk Radio for a chat with Daniel Major, the CEO of Goviex Uranium. Govx trades on the TSX Venture Exchange as GXU, and in the U.S. on the OTC as GVXXF. Govx is a mineral resource company focused on the exploration and development of uranium properties in Africa. With a substantial resource inventory, Govex's main objective is to become a major uranium supplier by exploring and developing its key projects, the Madaouela Project in Niger and the Muntanga Project in Zambia, both of which are forecast to be in production in this uranium cycle. Daniel, welcome back to the program. It's great to visit with you again.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Now, it's been a long time since we've chatted. You have been strategically waiting for a uranium cycle before you came back on the air with us, and I think we're there.
Yeah, I think we're well into the beginning of it. I think it's still got a long way to go, and I think we on this side of the fence have been telling the market that it will change. And for a while, it took the utilities to focus on EUP, the enriched product that they needed, given the sanctions in the US, to clear that out of the way. And U308 had to react at some stage, and it certainly did. It was the outperforming commodity last year of all commodities. So yeah, we're well on the way.
We're at $104 US per pound with regard to uranium, and these prices are completely outrageously good. Why haven't we seen that gap close between commodity prices and the equities, in your opinion, at least now?
That's a good question. I mean, I think for those of us who've been waiting for it to move, you see the price move and you expect it to have gone a lot further. There are analysts out there now already updating their long-term prices to well over $80 plus. Obviously, it's the spot market, and how that ties through to the contract market will make a difference, particularly for those contracting their material going forward. We saw in the previous cycle that it shot up to 140, but then it came down quickly from there. So I think there is obviously some concern with some investors, that risk. But I think what we've now seen is a fundamentally different market than we saw back in 2007. We're now looking at a position where there is no extra inventory floating around. And whatever inventory there is strategic, we don't meet the demands through production of going through. So we have to make up that with new mine. New mines are already showing they're not easy to do, and adding pounds is becoming harder. And I think we are going to see an increasing price move up, slow and steady from here onwards. We've broken through. So the equities will come up, and I expect them to go a lot higher still from where they are at the moment.
Fair enough, Daniel. Now, you've been busy during the last 10 years, at least. How did you expand that footprint in Africa, which is quite substantial between Niger, Zambia, and Mali during the last 10 years in a soft market?
In 2016, we thought that was the bottom of the market. It actually was the bottom of the market. It just took a little longer to get going than we thought. And we thought that it was time to consolidate. We felt that it was important as an African developer that you had more than one asset in your jurisdiction. And we put that portfolio together. Each of those projects is different, either technically or not just geographically as well. So that meant if anything changed from a technical aspect, we were able to handle that change as well. I'm glad we did. At some point in this interview, we'll probably come to the issues in Niger, but it meant we have now able to deal with that political change, and we have two projects to get on with, and the risks associated with one, we can counter on the other jurisdiction.
I've been chatting with colleagues in Niger. They're based in Niger anyway, and not necessarily in the uranium sector. And my first question to them was off the record, what kind of environment is there in Niger to do business now? Hasn't it been difficult? And I'll let you elaborate on that.
I think when the coup first occurred, my general comment regarding coups in Africa is that they're just democratic changes of government in a different way. And they tend not to be nationalistic or socialistic in their approach. And they tend to say we need the reason for this to go forward. But they generally like mines to keep operating. And that is definitely still the case. The government in Niger is very keen to ensure that the mines do develop and go forward. So the backing is there for that to continue to go forward. There are obviously some issues with the restrictions that have been placed by ECOWAS, particularly, which are making things slower, but that is not stopping what we are doing. So in Niger, we've carried on and redone our ESIA, which we had to do as a result of the changes that we made in the feasibility study. We continue to work with the lending banks who are keen to move forward, but obviously are waiting for some changes as well, because they're predominantly political banks, Western-backed, government-backed financing. But no, the government's very keen keen to see production go ahead. And we're very keen to keep moving forward on this year. It's just going to take a little bit longer than we were planning.
Give us a background of how far along you've come in Niger and maybe Zambia with regard to your Madaouela Project and your Muntanga Project.
In the case of Madaouela, we obviously did the feasibility study in 2022, the end of, and went straight into the debt discussions. By July, we had LOIs in that covered the full debt package potentially. We obviously still had to go through all the various stages of due diligence, etc., which we paused while we waited because we got the last LOI on the morning of the coup, and obviously things politically changed. We had to deal with the lenders, and they asked for that pause. Our conversations this year are, we might as well start the process again. So we'll be moving forward with the lenders on the due diligence and the structuring going forward into the rest of this year, and we'll see where that goes. We obviously won't be doing a lot of field work until we have more sight of financing. But Madaouela can go forward slowly but steadily, and we will continue to do that. And as we can push out to things like offtake, once we know where we are with the lending, we can advance that project.
I know with regard to Niger, offtake possibilities are with Europe. They're also with China. China is very active in that country.
Yeah, China is there, both as a uranium developer. They have the Azalik mine, but they also have the Zinda oil refinery as well. They're a major oil producer in Niger. The Chinese are there. One of the advantages just being in Africa in general is you can sell anywhere in the world. You're not restricted. They tend to ensure that whoever you're set with, the country you're selling to, has signed up to the non-proliferation agreements. And that is really the only restriction that's placed on you. Yes, you can sell anywhere. And even with the Western off-takers, there's clearly, with all the restrictions we're seeing associated with Russian sanctions, etc., if the US government further sanctions Russian feed and the constraints of material coming out of Kazakhstan, Africa becomes more interesting, both for the West and for the Chinese. Last week, I was at Indaba, and I've never seen so many people from the US government there. The place was heaving for US government appointees, really looking to push into critical minerals and realizing that Africa is the place to be and the commitments there. The US government is trying to play catch up with the Chinese at the moment and using the mighty dollar to do it. So you'll see a lot of announcements around with the DFC backing projects at various stages, including supporting funding of ESIAs, funding feasibility studies, whatever it takes to try and secure African minerals for the US.
And I guess that uranium is probably the most reliable source of clean energy and the cheapest source of clean energy that we have.
Oh, absolutely. And it's definitely on that list of critical minerals. And you've seen this bifurcation in a lot of the critical minerals between the East and the West. And everybody's trying to find the sources of it. And Africa's always been known as underdeveloped, underexplored, but definitely has an incredible amount of potential. And so you are starting to see this US and European commitments to Africa, but particularly the US side driving forward. So, that's why we're talking to our potential lenders for GEF, same as our peers at Global Atomic. And the nice thing for us is we're following Global Atomic down the same path, which means they're doing all the hard work for us in making sure the whole process works smoothly, and we'll follow it on. But no, that was really positive, and it really helped me as well, because you asked me about our projects, and then we have Zambia as well. Part of my work for Indaba as well was trying to see who would be interested when we bring out the feasibility for Muntanga on being involved in the financing for that. And I always assumed it would be relatively straightforward, and definitely we had a lot of interest from potential lenders, particularly the Southern African ones, North American. Again, once we get to the end of our feasibility study, I think we'll have a very large pool to reach out to on the lending side for Muntanga. So the target really is to get that feasibility study done by August, September of this year, and then go straight into the financing stage. And Zambia is a very developing country, and I think there's a lot of positivity about Zambia at the moment as well. Government's doing a lot of work on infrastructure. It's doing a lot of work on power. It's doing a lot on trying to open up the mining industry. We benefit from those changes of strategy and rhetoric coming out of the Zambian government as well.
I understand you're building a pilot plant. Is that correct?
We have a small pilot plant that's going on in South Africa at MinTech. So we'll get that done this year. And that's really just to prove up the work that we had already had done in the past. Goviex acquired these projects, the two of them that make up Muntanga. Those projects had gone to pre-feasibility study before, and as we didn't do the work, we funded to do it again. So that work's undergoing.
So describe how the company may look within 5 years, potentially. You're an exploration and development company. At some point, do you take the resource that you've developed and approach offtake?
Exactly the strategy. We've got a lot of exploration upside on our property, but our focus has been to get the resources we have generating cash. And the moment we can get cash generation, we can then expand out our exploration and look to build up the long term. If it all goes well, as we would expect, within 5 years, we will have those two producing assets. So both Muntanga and Madaouela would be up and producing. That would give us about 5 million pounds of uranium annum of production out of those jurisdictions. That would then help us expand in both of those jurisdictions our exploration play. I like Southern Africa as well. There's a lot of potential over that whole Karoo belt, and we would look to expand again beyond that. There's plenty of scope here in the long term for the uranium developer, and particularly those of us in Africa.
Does that make you a producer? Will you remain a producer? I know you've picked up a project from Denison. Are you a takeout candidate down the road? What's the strategy?
Look, at the end of the day, you have to push yourself to add value all the way along the process. The logical way of doing that is to keep advancing those projects. And as on the curve, projects gain value at different points. If you have taken all the risk off the table and become a producer and you get taken out, then the price premium is substantially greater. So why would you stop at any particular point in this process? Our target is to become a producer. If in heading towards that target, somebody thinks we're worth more than we think we're worth, then obviously we would be open to a transaction that appropriately returns to shareholders going forward. So no, it's always keep moving forward with the projects. We're not a prospect generator, and that's their methodology. Just find something and sell it. Ours is to go forward until somebody else thinks it's worth more than we do.
What should potential investors take a hard look at?
Look, the fundamentals, as we've already discussed, are fantastic for the uranium market. In 2022, 75% of all production came from existing mines. The 25 had to come from inventory, okay? By 2030, existing mines will only produce 20% of all production coming out, and the rest has to be made up by projects. So the risk is there. Therefore, look at the companies that have projects that can get into production. Assess whether you think they're going to make it, because those are the guys you're going to need at the other end of this. And we have very straightforward projects, and particularly the Muntanga project, very basic project, open pit, heap leaching operation. The other thing I think from jurisdictional risk, yes, Zambia is looking great. And I raise that one particularly because we're trading on a valuation that is placing us on a massive discount just to our Muntanga project. You're getting Madaouela for free with Goviex at the moment. And that doesn't make any sense. That Madaouela has a considerable value to it. And certainly where we're seeing the commitments going forward for financing the projects, Madaouela will get there. It'll just take longer than we originally planned. But in the meantime, we have a highly leveraged position sitting down there in Zambia at Muntanga, and we will push that one forward as well. So there's a lot of value here. You were talking at the beginning about the sector not really following the price yet. Govx is definitely one of those that's got a long way to go to catch up with that uranium market. You put in even $75 into our models, and each of our projects is almost worth $290-300 million each. So as I say, we're trading at a big discount just on the one project without even the second project adding value. So there's a long way to go.
Daniel, as I mentioned earlier in this interview, sustainability is one of the most important aspects of critical minerals and the mining industry right now. So tell us what you're doing in that regard.
Yeah, we've been, as we decided to move from being an explorer to being a developer, really ramping up our ESG. But our approach is very much about the pragmatism of it, ensuring that the projects that we build and the way that we build them and the way we incorporate them with the communities is fit for purpose. We've already put out a couple of sustainability reports using Onion, showing our path forward. At the part of every project development study that we go to, the first thing we do is actually look at the way our projects will impact on the environment and the people around us and seek to mitigate that. You do have to remember in places like Africa where water is a constraint, you don't want to be using up water, so you find ways of putting that through to limit the amount of water you've got. In Zambia, we have commitments on local employment, in our case, local employment. So we've realized that, for example, 2/3 plus of of our local labor force has no English. So we are currently running a very large adult education program. We've got over 500 students at the moment learning English to get them up to grade 4 so we can then train them further to take jobs on the mine. But that means that the people that are locally, which is the ones you want to be into the development of the mine and want that commitment for that mine, are going to be the ones that want to be there and want to see the long-term sustainability of that project. Yes, there's been a lot of hype over ESG, but actually when you sit down and look at it from a prepper, engineering, project, pragmatic approach, ESG has been what the mining industry has been doing for a very long time. With health, safety, environment, but more the commitments that we've got to go forward with communities, local procurement, which are all good things. You don't want communities and governments losing out as their resources are being mined. And there are ways to make sure that does not occur, or you seek to mitigate it at least going forward. We have strong commitments there. We work with our communities to make sure that our mines will benefit them.
Daniel, it's always great to visit with you, and I'm going to have the pleasure of seeing you and your team in person at Mines and Money Miami, coming up at the Convention Center February 22nd and 23rd. It's going to be a great time, and I guess you'll be happy to get out of England for a bit.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful time now. Sun's shining, daffodils are out, but looking forward to Miami.
And for more information on that, by the way, listeners, I would encourage you, in addition to traveling to Goviex.com, is to visit minesandmoney.com and sign up for that. We are always welcoming investors to participate in this event, and it is free. Daniel, thanks so much for joining me today on the program. We'll see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you. Take care.
I've been speaking with Daniel Major, CEO of Goviex Uranium. Govx trades on the TSX Venture Exchange as GXU and the U.S. on the OTC as GVXXF. The company's website is goviex.com, Goviex.com. I'm Ellis Martin, and this is Money Talk Radio.
Subscribe to Money Talk Radio. It's free. Go right now to ellismartin.com.